said? You said what about Black Dog?
He's really fast.
He was fast. He showed, what was the idiom? Yeah?
His clean heels.
He showed a clean pair of heels, bud.
Yeah.
All right. So he was a member of the crew. He's scared of Captain, and he's fast. What else about him? About Black Dog? Yeah.
He wants to steal Captain's treasure.
Yeah. He wants. At least Captain says, he wants this chest up here. That's what they're after. What does Captain tell Jim to do if Black Dog comes back? Remember? You're gonna tip me with Black Spot. That's what you do.
Doesn't he want him to get on a horse and take his chest?
No?
Doesn't he want him to go to the doctor?
Yeah, he's like, to that Dr. Swab. Go to the doctor, get him, and he'll catch who? Who will the doctor catch? He brings all his magistrates.
Yeah.
Well, Billy Bones is already there. Al,
Catch Black Dog.
you'll catch Black Dog, yes, and he says somebody else. Jordan?
Flint.
No, Flint, we said. You wrote down Flint, right?
Mm-hmm.
Flint's dead. But you catch Flint's crew. It's like, what? All of them, that is. The rest of Flint's crew. So who's Flint? You transitioned me well there, Jordan. That's where I was trying to go. Who's Flint?
He was the real captain of the ship.
Ah, he was the real captain of the ship. But we said he died. What did that make Billy Bones?
The captain.
The captain, because he was the first mate. So, Captain Flint was in charge of the ship. Billy Bones was the first mate. And he said, he gave it to me, Savannah. He's kind of rambling. Gave something to him in Savannah. I'm the only one who knows where the place is. And Jim's like, what are you talking about, man? Next person was the blind beggar. How would you describe him? Him and Jim are two I want to focus on. How would you describe the blind beggar?
An accurate, intimidating blind person who's another part of the crew.
Okay, he was part of the crew. He was accurate in that he knew how to maneuver out of the building, right? He knew how to get away after he gave Billy Bones the black spot, right? That's what you meant. That's where they used the word accurate. But I thought in the beginning he was lost. Al?
He was like blind.
Yeah, he was blind. He couldn't see. He was ugly looking, white, had a big cloak, had a big green scarf over his eyes. It must have been a nasty way he lost his eyesight. Didn't want to look weird to people. I think he was all lost and scared. But then when he left, he was like, so, what does that mean? What kind of person is he?
Could someone tell a man who lost his eyesight while serving King George? God bless the king. Where am I?
Solomon?
He a liar?
I would say he's a little bit of a liar. What else?
The dynamic character?
Well, dynamic is something we can measure from beginning to end.
Oh.
In this, I would say he's deceitful and staying static. Is that if we try and think about what was going on, where'd Black Dog run off to? Ran off to the north, right? Even though I know north's that way, but north. He ran off north. What did he do? Go sit in a treehouse and feel sorry for his shoulder? He talked to the other shipmates. And after talking to the other shipmates, here comes old Pew. To do what? What Pew wanted to come here for? He clearly knew where he was going. Just needed a little bit of help in. What was he there for?
To give the black spot.
Remember they exchanged something? That was the title of the chapter. Captain opened it and said, 10 o'clock. We have 6 hours. Billy Bones was able to get in there, give it to him, and run off. So that brings us to Jim. You were supposed to write something down, what you observed about Jim. And did we learn anything new about Jim Hawkins? Yeah?
He's now filled with like sadness because of his dead father.
Okay, he lost his dad. Good. That's good. That's going to help us with motivation later. Good. What else?
He's taking on his dad's responsibility.
All right, he's taking on he's having to grow up pretty quick. Right? He's 12 or 13 and his dad's gone. So he's having to take charge. And so who's in charge of making sure the people in the inn are safe? Jim. And what happens when one of Flint's old crew comes by?
Ah, I'm a blind man, help me.
What happens?
Messes up.
Yeah, he messes up. Jim gets duped. He's naive still. Remember we wrote that down? Oh, there's a poor blind guy. Poor guy. Oh, man. Hey. Oh, you poor soul. Hey, you're in front of the Admiral Benbow.
Oh, could you please help me? Oh, yeah, sure. Oh, crap, this guy's a bad guy.
He hadn't met bad guys before. Captain's the only one he knew, and he's not that bad once you get to know him. But now he's up against smarter, stronger, more ruthless people, right? So, I wanted to make sure we got a picture of how does he handle being tricked. So that's probably some of the other emotional, when he starts crying at the end. Can't believe I let this guy in. I got tricked. And that's where we pick up, is we have a dead captain, face first on the floor. And there's Jim, crying over his body. If you have a book, you would turn to page 14. The title is The Sea Chest. Chapter 4. It also looks like an IV, that's Roman numerals. V stands for 5, and you subtract anything that's in front of a bigger number, so that's 5 minus 1 is 4. The sea chest. I lost no time, of course, in telling my mother all that I knew, and perhaps should have told her long before, and we saw ourselves at once in a difficult and dangerous position. We remember back to the 2 chapters ago when it said, it's the beginning of the mysterious events of us being rid of the captain, but not of his affairs. We're still left with his problems, aren't we? Some of the man's money, if he had any, was certainly due to us, but it was not likely that our captain's shipmates, above all the 2 specimens seen by me, Black Dog and the blind beggar, would be inclined to give up their booty in payment in the dead man's debts. The captain's order to mount at once and ride for Dr. Livesey would have left my mother alone and unprotected, which was not to be thought of. I can't do what he said, because I'm not going to leave my mom alone in case those bad guys come back. Indeed, it seemed impossible for either of us to remain much longer in the house. The fall of the coals in the kitchen grate, the very ticking of the clock, filled us with alarms. Don't forget the fact there's a dead guy on our floor. The neighborhood to our ears seemed haunted by approaching footsteps, and what between the dead body of the captain on the parlor floor and the thought of that detestable blind beggar hovering near at hand and ready to return, there were moments when, as the saying goes, I jumped in my skin for terror. Something must speedily be resolved upon, and it occurred to us at last to go forth together and seek help in the neighboring hamlet. No sooner said than done. Bareheaded as we were, we ran out at once in the gathering evening and the frosty fog. Which direction is the hamlet or village? Which direction did Captain go when he went on his walk? He went this way. which way did Black Dog run? That way. Because if Captain would have seen him, he probably would have had a fight down there. So Black Dog probably ran in the opposite direction of where Captain was. And Captain was always going down to the village waiting to see if he could see people. So the hamlet, or small town, lay not many 100 yards away, though out of view on the other side of the next cove. Remember, there's nobody really around us. We're kind of in a U here. And so around this corner is the hamlet, and around that corner is just country. And what greatly encouraged me, it was in the opposite direction from whence the blind man had made his appearance. And whether he had presumably returned, like the blind guy came from that direction too. We were not many minutes on the road, though we sometimes stopped to lay hold of each other and hearken, which means hold each other and go, hearken, I'm scared. Right? Like, you ever heard of hark, the herald angels sing? It's connected to that word, like to be like, whoa. But there was no unusual sound, nothing but the low wash of the ripple and the croaking of crows in the wood. It was already candlelight when we reached the hamlet, and I shall never forget how much I was cheered to see the yellow shine in the doors and windows. But that, as it proved, was the best of the help we were likely to get in that quarter. For you would have thought men would have been ashamed of themselves. No soul would consent to return with us to the Admiral Benbow. If you think about it, all they're trying to do is get to, a few 100 yards. That's like getting to the Pizza Hut. They have to walk about that far. They got to get to the Pizza Hut. That's south of here, right? Yeah, but they know that the blind guy went north up Caw Valley Road. That's kind of where they're at. They don't know how far away he is. He could be in that farmhouse. He could be up at Cat's Gymnastics. They don't know. But they know they got to get to Pizza Hut to find out. So that's a bit of a walk. When you go out there for home base today, you'll be like, ooh, in the dark, there's some pirates out there, some guys, that's a tough walk. So you'd hearken yourself too, I think. It was already candlelight. So nobody wants to come back and help them though. They're like, I ain't going from Pizza Hut to the middle school. No way. I'm not walking that far in the dark now that I know what you got going on. The more we told of our troubles, the more man, woman, and child, they clung to the shelters of their houses. The name of Captain Flint, though it was strange to me, again, he's naive, right? Strange to me, was well enough known to some there and carried a great weight of terror. They hear Captain Flint, I ain't moving, I'm locking my doors. Some of the men who had been to field work on the far side of the Admiral Benbow, up near Cat's Gymnastics, so they said, they saw several strangers on the road, and they took them to be smugglers, and they bolted away. We saw some guys up by Cat's. It's actually Kit's Hole. I know it kind of works out for me, but Kit's Hole is like a little small cove where you could park a boat. And it says at least one had seen a little lugger or a small little steamboat in what we called Kit's Hole. For that matter, anyone who was a comrade of the captain's was enough to frighten them to death. And the short and the long of the matter was that while we could get several who were willing enough to ride in Dr. Livesey's, which lay in another direction, not one would come to help us defend the inn. Everybody said, oh, we're here at Pizza Hut. Well, we'll go over to Gambino's and we'll go down to Dyer's. We'll go down there and get some help, but we're not going anywhere near Kit's Hole. We're definitely not going back to your house. They say cowardice is infectious. When somebody's scared, everybody else gets scared. But the argument is, on the other hand, it's also a great emboldener. It makes us stronger. And so when each had had his say, my mother made them a speech. She would not, she declared, lose money that belonged to have fun in this boy. If none of the rest of you dare, she said, Jim and I dare, back we will go the way we came. And small thanks to you, big hulking, chicken-hearted men. We'll have that chest open and we die for it. And I thank you for that bag, Mrs. Crossley, to bring back our lawful money. And it's like, well, if you're not going to come, well, then I'll just take your bag then. Of course, I said I would go with my mother. And of course, they all cried out at our foolhardiness. You guys are a bunch of morons, stay here. But even then, not a man would go along with us. All they would do is give me a loaded pistol. Oh, I don't know how to use this. Lest we were attacked. and to promise to have horses ready saddled in case we were pursued on our return, while one lad was to ride forward to the doctor's in search of armed assistance. Somebody's gonna go get the doctor, but here's some guns. Good luck. We don't know how many there are, maybe what, 18, 20 guys? You'll be fine. My heart was beating finely when we too set forth in the cold night upon this dangerous venture. A full moon was beginning to rise and peered redly through the upper edges of the fog. And this increased our haste, for it was plain before we came forth again that all would be bright as day, and our departure exposed to the eyes of any watchers. So there's a fog at least, and it had set that up in the last chapter, that it's foggy outside, so nobody can see us, but the moon is full. So we're going to be easily seen here in a little bit. There was no street lights. When the moon was out, you could see a long ways. We slipped along the hedges, noiseless and swift. Nor did we see or hear anything to increase our terrors, till, to our huge relief, the door of the Admiral Benbow had closed behind us. They made it back. I slipped the bolt at once, click, and we stood and panted for a moment in the dark, alone in the house with the captain's dead body. Then my mother got a candle in the bar, and holding each other's hands, we advanced into the parlor like, oh. He lay as we had left him, on his back, with his eyes open and one arm stretched out.
Did you draw down the blind, Jim?
Whispered my mother.
They might come and watch outside. And now
She said, when I had done so.
we have to get a key off of that. Who's to touch it? I should like to know.
She kind of gave a sob as she said the words. Who's going to touch the dead body? Oh, it's not going to be me. Those ghosts. I went down on my knees at once. On the floor, close to his hand, there was a little round of paper. What's that? Blackened on the one side. I could not doubt this was the black spot. Taking it up, I found written on the other side, one side is black and dark, and the other side, in very good clear hand, this short message. You have till 10 tonight. He had till 10, Mother, said I. And just as I said it, our old clock began striking. Bong, 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 bong. It's good news. I was only 6.
Now, Jim, that key.
I felt in his pockets, one after another. A few small coins, a thimble, some thread, big needles, big piece of pigtail tobacco bitten away at the end, his goalie with the crooked handle or knife, a pocket compass, a tinder box to light fires with, and that was all that it contained. I began to despair.
Perhaps it's round his neck,
Suggested my mother. Overcoming a strong repugnance, I tore open his shirt at the neck, and there, sure enough, hanging from a bit of tarry string, which I cut with his own goalie, we found the key. At this triumph, we were filled with hope and hurried upstairs without delay to the little room where he had slept so long and where his box had stood since the day of his arrival. It was like any other man's sea chest on the outside with the initial B burned on the top of it. It was burned with a hot iron, and the corners somewhat smashed and broken as if by long usage.
Give me the key.
Said my mother, oh, now she knows the key. And though the lock was very stiff, she had turned it and thrown back the lid in a twinkling. A strong smell of tobacco and tar rose from the interior, but nothing was to be seen on top except a suit of very good clothes. And they were carefully brushed and folded. They'd never been worn, my mother said. Under that, the miscellany, or odds and ends, began. a quadrant, a tin cannikin, several sticks of tobacco, 2 brace of very handsome pistols, a piece of bar silver, an old Spanish watch, some other trinkets of little value, mostly of foreign make, a pair of compasses mounted with brass, and 5 or 6 curious West Indian shells. It's often set me thinking since that he should have carried about these shells with him in his wandering, guilty, and hunted life. The guy's a shell collector, who'd have known? He's got a nice suit. He wore that nasty one every single day. He's got nice guns. This guy's got some nice stuff. In the meantime, we found nothing of any value but the silver and the trinkets. And neither of these were in our way. Underneath, there was an old boat cloak, big blanket, whitened with sea salt on many a harbor bar. My mother pulled it up with impatience, and there lay before us the last things in the chest, a bundle tiled up in oilcloth, looking like papers, and a canvas bag that gave forth a touch, a jingle of gold. Oh yeah.
I'll show these rugs that I'm an honest woman,
Said my mother.
I'll have my dues and not a farthing over. Here, hold Mrs. Crossley's bag.
She's like, I'm going to get what he owes us. All right? It was a long and difficult business, for the coins were of all countries and sizes, doubloons, louis, guineas, pieces of 8, and I know what else besides, all shaken together at random. The guineas, too, were about the scarcest, and it was these that only my mother knew how to make count.
Where are the green ones? Oh, there's one. Okay, good. Found one. Only 37 more to go. Oh, I found another green one. All right. Let's go.
When we were about halfway through, I suddenly put my hand on an arm. For I had heard in the silent, frosty air a sound that brought my heart into my mouth, the tapping of a blind man and his stick upon the frozen road. It drew nearer and nearer, while we sat holding our breath. Then it struck sharply on the inn door, and we could hear the handle being turned and the bolt rattling as the wretched being tried to enter. And then there was a long time of silence, both within and without. At last the tapping recommenced, and to our indescribable joy, the gratitude slowly died away again, till it ceased in the earth.
Mother, take the whole thing and let's get going.
For I was sure the bolted door must have seemed suspicious, and would bring the whole hornet's nest about our ears. Oh, how thankful I was that I had bolted it. None could tell who had never met that terrible blind man. But my mother, frightened as she was, would not consent to take a fraction more than was her due.
Oh, I'll just get another few green ones. Just a second.
It was not yet 7. She would not consent to take a fraction more than was her due, and was obstinately unwilling to be content with less. It was not yet 7, she said, by a long way. She knew her rights, and she would have them. And she was still arguing with me when a little low whistle sounded a good way off upon the hill. That was enough, and more than enough, for both of us.
I'll take what I have. That's good enough.
And I'll take this to square the count. I picked up the oilskin packet. The next moment we were both roping downstairs, leaving the candle by the empty chest, and the next we had opened the door and were in full retreat. We had not started a moment too soon. The fog was rapidly dispersing. Already the moon shone quite clear on the high ground on either side, and it was only in the exact bottom of the dell and round the tavern door that a thin veil still hung unbroken to conceal the first steps of our escape. Far less than halfway to the hamlet, very little beyond the bottom of the hill, we must come forth into the moonlight. Nor was this all, for the sound of several footsteps came running already to our ears, and as we looked back in their direction, a light tossing to and fro, still rapidly advancing, showed that one of the newcomers carried a lantern. We're trying to get out this way, they're coming from that way.
My dear, take the money and run. I'm going to faint.
This was clearly Certainly the end for both of us, I thought. How I cursed the cowardice of the neighbors, how I blamed my poor mother for her honesty and her greed, for her past foolhardiness and now her present weakness. We were just at the little bridge, by good fortune, and I helped her, tottering as she was, to the edge of the bank, where, sure enough, she gave a sigh and fell on my shoulder. I do not know how I found the strength to do it at all, and I'm afraid it was roughly done. Kick her down the hill. But I managed to drag her down the bank and a little way under the arch. Farther I could not move her, for the bridge was too low to let me do more than crawl below it. So there we had to stay, my mother almost entirely exposed, and both of us within earshot of the inn. So there's a little curve and a little bridge over here. Jim's over there looking at the inn. My curiosity, we're here at the last of The Blind Man, chapter 5. My curiosity, in a sense, was stronger than my fear, for I could not remain where I was, but crept back to the bank again, whence, sheltering my head behind a bush of broom, I might command the road before our door. I was scarcely in position ere my enemies began to arrive. 7 or 8 of them, running hard, their feet beating out of time along the road, and the man with the lantern some paces in front. 3 men ran together, hand in hand, and I made out, even through the mist, that the middle man of this trio was the blind beggar. The next moment, his voice showed me that I was right.
Down with the door!
He cried.
Aye, aye, sir,
Answered 2 or 3, and a rush was made upon the Admiral Benbow, the lantern-bearer following. And then I could see them pause and hear speeches passed in a lower key, as if they were surprised to find the door open. But the pause was brief, for the blind man again issued his commands. His voice sounded louder and higher, as if he were afire with eagerness and rage. In! He shouted, and cursed them for their delay. 4 or 5 of them obeyed at once, 2 remaining on the road with the formidable beggar. There was a pause, then a cry of surprise, then a voice shouting from the house, "Bill's dead!" But the blind man swore at them again for their delay.
Search him! Some of you circuit labbers, rest you aloft, get that chest!
I could hear their feet rattling up our old stairs, so that the house must have shook with it. Promptly afterwards, fresh sounds of astonishment arose. What? Oh my gosh! The window of the captain's room was thrown open with a slam and a jingle of broken glass. A man leaned out in the moonlight, head and shoulders, and addressed the blind beggar on the road below him.
Joe, they've been before us. Someone's turned the chest out alow and aloft. Is it there? Well, the money's there.
The blind man cursed the money.
Flint's fist, I mean,
He cried.
We don't see it here nohow,
Returned the man.
Here, you below there, is it on Bill?
Cried the blind man again. At that, another fellow, probably him who would remain below to search the captain's body, came to the door of the inn.
Bill's been over already, nothing left. It's these people at the end, it's that boy! I wish I'd put his eyes out.
Cried the blind man. Pew.
They were here no time ago. They had no boating when I tried to scatter lads and find them.
Sure enough. Oh, sorry.
Sure enough, they left their gleam here.
A candle. Said the fellow from the window.
Scatter and find them round the house.
Reiterated Pew, striking his stick upon the road. Then there followed a great to-do through all our old inn, heavy feet pounding to and fro, furniture thrown over, doors kicked in, until the very rocks re-echoed, and the men came out again, one after another on the road, and declared that we were nowhere to be found. Just then came that same whistle that had alarmed my mother and myself over the dead captain's money, was once more clearly audible through the night, but this time twice repeated. I had thought it to be the blind man's trumpet, so to speak, summoning his crew to the assault, but I now found that it was a signal from the hillside towards the hamlet, and from its effect upon the buccaneers, a signal to warn them of approaching danger. There's some guy up there watching out, telling them there's something happening.
There's Dirk again,
Said one.
twice. We'll have to budge, mates. Budge, you skunk? Dirk was a fool and a coward from the first. You wouldn't mind him. He must be close. They can't be far. You have your hands on it. Scatter. Look for them dogs. Oh, shiver my soul if I had eyes.
This appeal seemed to produce some effect, for two of the fellows began to look here and there among the lumber, but half-heartedly, I thought, and with half an eye on to their own danger all the time, while the rest stood irresolute on the road.
You have your hands on thousands, you fools, and you hang a leg. You'd be as rich as kings if you could find it, and you know it's here, and you're standing there malingering. There wasn't one of you dead-faced Bill, and I did it, a blind man. And I'm to lose my chance for you. I'm to be a poor crow that begged a sponge of a rum, but I might be rolling in a coach. If you had the pluck of a weevil and a biscuit, you'd catch them still. Ah, hang it, Pew, we've got the doubloons. They might have hid the blessed thing, said another. Take the Georges, Pew. Don't stand there squalling.
Well, squalling was the word for it. Pew's anger rose so high at these objections, till at last, his passion completely taking the upper hand, he struck them right and left in his blindness. Whack, whack, and the stick sounded heavily on more than one. These, in their turn, cursed back at the blind miscreant, threatened him in horrid terms, and tried in vain to catch the stick and wrest it from his grasp. Like, quit, hit me, man. This quarrel was the saving of us. For while it was still raging, another sound came from the top of the hill on the side of the hamlet, the tramp of horses galloping. Almost at the same time, a pistol shot, poof, flash and report, came from the hedge side, and that was plainly the last signal of danger, for the buccaneers turned at once and ran, separating in every direction, one seaward along the cove, one slant across the hill, and so on, that in half a minute not a sign of them remained. But Pew, him they had deserted, whether in sheer panic or out of revenge for his ill words and blows, I know not. But there he remained behind, tapping up and down the road in a frenzy, and groping and calling for his comrades. Finally, he took the wrong turn and ran a few steps past me towards the hamlet, crying, "Johnny! Black Dog! Jack!" and other names. You won't leave old Pew, mate? Not old Pew! Just then the noise of horses topped the rise, and 4 or 5 riders came in sight of the moonlight and swept at full gallop down the slope. At this, Pew saw his error, turned with a scream, "Ah!" and ran straight for the ditch, in which he rolled. But he was on his feet again in a second, and made another dash, now utterly bewildered, right under the nearest of the oncoming horses. I leaped to my feet and hailed the riders. They were pulling up, at any rate, horrified at the accident. And I soon saw what they were. One, tailing out behind the rest, was a lad that had gone from the hamlet to Dr. Livesey's. The rest were revenue officers whom he had met by the way, and with whom he had the intelligence to return at once. They had sent the kid from the hamlet. He had run off to go get Dr. Livesey, and instead he found a regiment of officers. Some news of the lugger in Kidd's Hole had found its way to Supervisor Dance. He's like the sheriff, and set him forth that night in our direction. And to that circumstance my mother and I owed our preservation from death. For Pew was dead, stone dead. As what happened to him?
He got ran over by horses.
He got run over by horses. As for my mother, when we carried her up to the hamlet, a little cold water and salts, and that soon brought her back again. She was none the worse for her terror, though she still continued to deplore the balance of the money.
Oh, I still can't believe I didn't get all of my guineas. Oh, I'm so upset.
Why did you just take the whole bag, lady? In the meantime, the supervisor, or sheriff, rode on, as fast as he could to Kidd's Hole. But his men had to dismount and grope down the dingle, leading and sometimes supporting their horses, and in continual fear of ambushes. Tried going down a forest, downhill to the ocean, and you don't know who's out there. It's not a very fun experience. So it was no great matter for surprise that when they got down to the hole, the lugger, or the little ship, was already underway. Though still close in, he hailed her, "Hey, stop there!" And a voice replied, telling him to keep out of the moonlight, you get some lead in you. And at the same time a bullet whizzed close by his arm. Soon after, the lugger doubled the point and disappeared. Mr. Dance stood there, as he said, like a fish out of water, and all he could do was to dispatch men to Bristol that's cut off there to warn the cutter. And that is just about as good as nothing. They've got off clean and there's an end. Only, he added, I am glad I trod on Master Pugh's corns, for by this time he had heard my story. I went back with him to the Admiral Benbow, and you cannot imagine a house in such a state of smash. The very clock had been thrown down by these fellows in their furious hunt after my mother and myself, and though nothing had actually been taken away except the captain's money and a little silver from the till or the register, I could see at once that we were ruined. Mr. Dance could make nothing of the scene. They got the money, you say? Well then, Hawkins, what in fortune were they after? More money, I suppose? No, sir, not money, I think, replied I. In fact, sir, I believe I have the thing in my breast pocket. And to tell you the truth, I should like to get it put in safety. To be sure, boy, quite right. I'll take it, if you like. I thought perhaps Dr. Livesey, I began. Perfectly right, he interrupted very cheerily. Perfectly right, a gentleman and a magistrate, or the judge. And now I come to think of it, I might as well ride round there myself and report to him, or Squire. Squire? We've heard that word before. Master Pugh's dead when all's done. Not that I regret it, but he is dead, you see, and people will make it out against an officer of His Majesty's revenue, if make it out they can. It's like somebody will turn this into bad news for us, so I better go deal with it now. Now I'll tell you, Hawkins, if you like, I'll take you along. I thanked him heartily for the offer, and we walked back to the hamlet where the horses were. By the time I had told my mother of my purpose, they were all in the saddle. Dogger, said Mr. Dance, you have a good horse. Take up this lad behind you. Dogger is his other cop. As soon as I mounted, holding on to Dogger's belt, the supervisor gave the word, and the party struck out at a bouncing trot on the road to Dr. Livesey's house. Do you have those sheets? All right. Put the shutter down. You good? Let's take a look here.